The courtroom erupted in chaos the moment the verdict was read. Not guilty. 2 words that made my blood boil. 2 words that set free a man responsible for laundering millions, bribing officials, and destroying countless lives. 2 words that made a mockery of everything I'd spent the last 8 months building. Luca Martinelli stood at the defense table, accepting congratulations from his team of overpriced lawyers with the casual grace of a man who'd never doubted the outcome. He wore his tailored suit like armor, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression revealing nothing but mild satisfaction, as if this was expected. As if justice was just another obstacle to be purchased and overcome. I gathered my files with trembling hands, refusing to let anyone see how deeply this defeat cut. 8 months of investigation. Hundreds of hours building a case. Witnesses who'd risked everything to testify, all for nothing. Ms. Sinclair. Judge Harrison's voice was gentle as I passed the bench. A word in my chambers, please. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The walk from the courtroom felt endless. Porters shouted questions I ignored. Martinelli's supporters sneered as I passed. And through it all, I felt his eyes on me. Watching. Assessing. Amused. I hated him. I hated everything he represented. The corruption that let men like him walk free while innocent people suffered. The system that bent and broke under the weight of money and power. The smug certainty that he was untouchable. My mother had been killed by a man like him. A man who'd bought his way out of consequences, who'd never faced justice for the violence he'd inflicted. I'd become a prosecutor to ensure no one else suffered that fate, and I just failed spectacularly. Judge Harrison's chambers were quiet, insulated from the circus outside. He waited until the door closed before speaking. That was a solid case, Valentina. You did everything right. Not everything. We lost. We lost because 2 jurors were compromised. Because a key witness recanted at the last minute. Because Martinelli's resources are virtually unlimited. He sighed heavily. This isn't your failure. It's the system's. The system I swore to uphold. The system you're fighting to fix. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Don't let this defeat define you. There will be other cases. Other chances. And in the meantime, Luca Martinelli walks free to continue destroying lives. For now. But men like him always make mistakes eventually. When he does, you'll be ready. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to cling to some hope that justice would eventually prevail, but right now, all I felt was rage. The bar across from the courthouse was packed with legal professionals drowning their various victories and defeats. I found a corner booth and ordered whiskey, ignoring the curious looks from colleagues who'd watched my case implode on live television. 2 drinks in, the anger had faded to a dull throb. 3 drinks in, I was reconsidering my career choices. 4 drinks in, this seat taken? I looked up to find Luca Martinelli sliding into the booth across from me. For a moment, I was too stunned to react. The man I'd spent 8 months trying to put behind bars was sitting across from me in a dive bar, wearing that same infuriating smirk he'd worn in the courtroom. You have a lot of nerve, I finally managed. I have a lot of many things. A nerve is just one of them. He signaled the bartender without taking his eyes off me. Macallan 18 meat. And another of whatever she's having. I don't want your drink. Consider it a peace offering. There's no peace between us. There never will be. See, that's what I find fascinating about you, Ms. Sinclair. He leaned back, completely at ease despite being in enemy territory. Most prosecutors treat our confrontations as business. Win some, lose some. Move on to the next case. But you, his green eyes studied me with unsettling intensity. You take it personally. You're a criminal. You should be in prison. According to 12 of my peers, I'm an innocent man. According to 12 people you bribed or threatened. Careful. His voice remained pleasant, but something dangerous flickered beneath the surface. Slander is actionable. Truth is an absolute defense. The drinks arrived. He raised his glass in a mock toast. To truth, then. Whatever that means in a world of alternative facts and paid testimonies. I didn't touch my glass. What do you want, Martinelli? Luca. Please. After everything we've been through together, I think we're past formalities. What do you want? He was quiet for a moment, swirling his whiskey with contemplative grace. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its playfulness. I wanted to meet the woman who almost beat me. Almost doesn't count. In my world, almost is the difference between life and death. You came closer than anyone has in a decade. He met my eyes. I respect that. I don't want your respect. What do you want? Justice. For you to pay for your crimes. For the system to actually work for once. Admirable goals. Naive but admirable. He finished his drink in one smooth motion. You know what I think? I couldn't care less what you think. I think you became a prosecutor because someone hurt you. Someone powerful. Someone who got away with it. He leaned forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne. I think you look at me and see him. Whoever he was. The accuracy of his assessment stole my breath. I think, he continued, that you've made it your mission to punish every criminal you encounter because you couldn't punish the one who mattered. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you, Valentina. He pulled a folder from inside his jacket and slid it across the table. Your father left when you were 6. Your mother raised you and your sister alone, working double shifts until she caught the attention of Vincent Caruso. He was charming at first, then controlling, then violent. When she tried to leave, he killed her. Made it look like a suicide. You were 17. My hands shook as I stared at the folder. How Caruso walked because he had connections. Money. Power. Sound familiar. His voice softened unexpectedly. You've spent the last 9 years trying to convict every man who reminds you of him, and I just became your biggest failure. Get out. Valentina, I said get out. I was on my feet before I knew it, the whiskey glass shattering against the wall behind his head. The bar went silent. Every eye turned toward our booth. Luca didn't flinch. Didn't react to the glass that had missed him by inches. Just looked up at me with those infuriatingly calm green eyes. Feel better? Not until you're behind bars. That's not going to happen. He rose slowly, adjusting his jacket with casual precision. But I admire your persistence. Go to hell. Already there. He stepped closer, close enough to touch. But here's the thing about hell, Ms. Sinclair. Once you've lived there long enough, you start to see it as home. He reached out, and I reacted on pure instinct. My palm connected with his cheek with a crack that echoed through the silent bar. His head snapped to the side, a red mark already blooming on his skin. I just slapped Luca Martinelli in front of at least 30 witnesses, including 4 of his men who'd materialized near the door and were now reaching for weapons I couldn't see but knew were there. That I was dead. I was absolutely dead, but Luca raised a hand, stopping them. He turned back to face me, and instead of the rage I expected, I saw something else entirely. He was smiling. Do that again, he said softly, and you're mine. What? You heard me. He reached up to touch his reddening cheek, his smile widening. No one's had the courage to strike me in 15 years. No one's been stupid enough to try. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. It's refreshing. You're insane. Probably. His eyes held mine, and I saw something burning there. Interest. Challenge. Hunger. But I'm also intrigued. And when I'm intrigued by something, I don't let it go. I'm not a thing. No. You're much more than that. He pulled a card from his pocket and slipped it into my jacket. When you're ready to have a real conversation, one without lawyers and judges and professional obligations, call me. I'd rather die. Dramatic. I like that too. He started toward the door, his men parting to let him pass. The threshold, he paused and looked back. Sweet dreams, Valentina. I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in a silent bar with a stinging palm and a racing heart. I pulled out his card and stared at it. Simple white cardstock. His name. A phone number. Nothing else. I should throw it away. Should pretend this entire encounter never happened. Should focus on my next case and forget Luca Martinelli even existed. Instead, I slipped the card into my pocket just in case. The next morning I found flowers on my desk, white roses, 24 of them, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Card attached contained only 3 words, still feeling it. I threw them in the trash. An hour later, more arrived. Read this time. With a different note, you're beautiful when you're angry. Those went in the trash too. At BY noon, my office looked like a funeral home. Colleagues whispered. My assistant asked if I had a secret admirer. My boss raised an eyebrow but said nothing. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Stop sending flowers, I answered. Stop throwing them away. Luca's voice was warm with amusement. Do you know how hard it is to find quality roses on short notice? I'm sure your army of minions managed. They're called employees. And yes, they're very resourceful. What do you want? Dinner. Tonight. 8 o'clock. There's a restaurant in Tribeca called Maria. I'll send a car. I'm not having dinner with you. Why not? Case is over. You're no longer professionally obligated to hate me. I'm personally obligated to hate you. Give me 1 meal to change your mind. 1 meal won't change anything. Then you have nothing to lose. A pause. Come on, Valentina. Live dangerously. I live dangerously every time I walk into a courtroom. That's not danger. That's procedure. His voice dropped. I'm offering you the real thing. I should have said no. Should have hung up, reported the harassment, done something sensible and professional. Instead, I heard myself ask, just dinner. Just dinner. We talk like civilized human beings. No lawyers, no cases, no history. Just 2 people sharing a meal. And if I still hate you afterward, then at least you'll have an opinion based on actual experience instead of assumptions. It was a bad idea. A terrible idea. The kind of idea that destroyed careers and ruined lives. 8 o'clock, I said. Don't be late. His laugh was rich and genuine. Wouldn't dream of it. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, wondering what the hell I'd just agreed to and wondering why part of me was looking forward to it. Maria was everything I expected from a Martinelli dinner invitation, elegant without being ostentatious. Intimate without being claustrophobic. The kind of place where power brokers made deals over wine that cost more than cars and food that tasted like art. I'd changed 3 times before leaving my apartment, finally settling on a simple black dress that said professional but not trying too hard. My hands were steady as I walked through the door, but my heart was racing like I'd run a marathon. The hostess recognized Luca's name immediately, her professional smile warming as she led me to a private table in the back. Of course he'd reserved the most secluded spot. Of course he'd arranged everything to maximize our privacy. Of course he was already there, waiting. Luca rose as I approached, and I hated how my breath caught at the sight of him. He'd traded his courtroom suit for something more casual. Dark slacks, a black button-down with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. No tie. No pretense that he looked almost human. You came. He pulled out my chair, the gesture oddly old-fashioned. I said I would. People say a lot of things they don't mean. I'm not people. No. His eyes swept over me as he returned to his seat. You're definitely not. Wine appeared without being ordered. Food followed shortly after, course after elegant course that I barely tasted. My attention was fixed on the man across from me, searching for the monster I knew lurked beneath the charm. You're staring, he observed. I'm studying. Find anything interesting? I'm still looking. He laughed, and I hated how much I liked the sound. You know, most women find me considerably less threatening outside a courtroom. Most women haven't spent 8 months trying to put you in prison. True. Although I suspect most women would have given up after month 3 when your star witness conveniently developed amnesia. I don't give up. I noticed. He swirled his wine. That's what first caught my attention, actually. Your tenacity. Most prosecutors would have accepted the plea deal I offered. You refused on principle. You were offering 6 months for crimes worth 20 years. I was offering certainty versus risk. You chose risk. I chose justice. And lost. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. This time, you're planning to come after me again. Not a question. The moment I have enough evidence, yes. And yet here you are, sharing dinner with your target. His eyes glittered with amusement. Some might call that a conflict of interest. Some might call it reconnaissance. Gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. He leaned forward. What have you learned so far? That you're more attractive than any criminal has a right to be. That your laugh does things to my stomach I'd rather not examine. That I can't decide if I want to slap you again or kiss you. That you like expensive wine and Italian food, I said instead. Groundbreaking stuff. You're deflecting. I'm being cautious. Same thing. He set down his glass. Let me make this easier. You want to know if I'm really the monster you've built me up to be in your head. The answer is complicated. Monsters don't think they're complicated. They think they're justified. Maybe. Or maybe real life is messier than the categories we create to make sense of it. He held my gaze. I've done things that would horrify you. I've also done things that might surprise you. I'm not asking you to absolve me. I'm just asking you to see me. I see a man who's built an empire on suffering. You see a man who inherited an empire he never asked for. His voice hardened slightly. Do you know what happens when the heir to a crime family tries to walk away? Do you know what they do to people who attempt to leave? So you're a victim now? I'm a survivor. There's a difference. He leaned back. My father was a monster. Real, genuine, unambiguous. He killed people for pleasure, not profit. He terrorized his own family as casually as he terrorized his enemies. When he died, I had 2 choices. Take over and try to change things from within. Or walk away and let someone worse fill the vacuum. You expect me to believe you're some kind of reluctant crime lord? I expect you to believe nothing. I'm just telling you my truth. His eyes held mine. Since I took over, we've eliminated human trafficking from our operations entirely. We've stopped dealing in drugs that destroy communities. We've focused on victimless crimes, if such a thing exists. Am I a saint? No. But I'm not my father either. I wanted to dismiss his words as manipulation. Wanted to cling to the simple narrative I'd constructed. Bad man does bad things. Good woman puts bad man away. Justice served, but nothing about Luca Martinelli was simple. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me with something other than fear or greed. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. And because I find myself wanting you to understand me, which is inconvenient, given that you're dedicated to my destruction. Very inconvenient. Extremely. His smile was crooked, almost boyish. So what do we do about it? I don't know. The honest answer surprised us both. You're supposed to be simple. Case to build. A target to pursue. You're not supposed to be human? Interesting. He laughed again, and this time I let myself enjoy it. High praise from someone who compared me to a monster 5 minutes ago. The night is young. I might still find evidence. I hope you do. His fingers tightened around mine. I hope you dig deep enough to find every secret I've buried. I hope you understand exactly what I am. Why? Because then, when you still choose to have dinner with me, I'll know it's real. The air between us crackled with something I didn't want to name. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. I should pull away. Should remember who he was, what he'd done, why I dedicated my career to stopping people like him. Instead, I asked, "Is this what you do? Charm prosecutors until they forget they're supposed to hate you?" You're the first prosecutor I've ever wanted to charm. The rest were just obstacles. You're. He paused, searching for words. Different. Because I slapped you. Because you weren't afraid to. His voice dropped. Everyone's afraid of me, Valentina. Everyone pretends, performs, calculates every word for maximum safety. You threw a glass at my head and hit me in front of my men because you were angry. Not strategic. Not careful. Just real. That was stupid, not admirable. It was human. And human is something I rarely get to experience. The vulnerability in his words caught me off guard. For a moment, he wasn't Luca Martinelli, crime lord and target. He was just a man, lonely and complicated, reaching across an impossible divide. This can't go anywhere, I heard myself say. You know that. I know what the rules say. I've never been very good with rules. I'm a prosecutor. My entire life is rules. And yet you're here. He stood, circling the table to stand beside me. Having dinner with the enemy. Letting him hold your hand. Wondering what it would feel like if he kissed you. I'm not wondering, liar. He was right. God help me, he was right. Luca, say it again. His hand cupped my face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. Say my name like that again. We can't do this. We're already doing it. His thumb brushed my lower lip. The only question is how far we're willing to go. Every rational thought screamed at me to stop. To stand up, walk out, preserve what was left of my professional integrity. Instead, I closed my eyes as his lips met mine. The kiss was soft at first, questioning, giving me every chance to pull away. When I leaned into him instead, something shifted. His hand tangled in my hair. His other arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate, months of tension finally finding release. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This is a terrible idea, I whispered. The worst. It's going to end badly. Probably. I should go. You should. But he didn't release me. Or you could come home with me. And what? Pretend you're not a criminal? Pretend I'm not committed to your destruction? No. His eyes held mine. Come home with me and let's figure out what this is. Together. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to trust yourself. He stepped back, offering his hand. One night. No expectations. No obligations. Just us, trying to understand something neither of us expected. I looked at his extended hand. The man who should be my enemy but felt like something else entirely. At the future I was about to complicate beyond repair, I took his hand. His penthouse was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined cold opulence. Marble floors and designer furniture and art chosen for price tags rather than beauty. Kind of space that screamed wealth without warmth. Instead, I found books. Hundreds of them, covering every wall, stacked on tables, piled beside comfortable chairs. First editions mixed with worn paperbacks. Philosophy beside poetry beside pulp fiction. You read, I said stupidly. Voraciously. It's one of the few pleasures that doesn't come with complications. He moved to a bar cart, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. My father thought reading was weakness. He burned my books whenever he found them. So I learned to hide them. Built a secret library in a wine cellar no one used. What happened to it? Still there. Bigger now. He handed me a glass. I'll show you sometime, if you're interested. I wandered the room, examining titles. Dostoevsky, Austen, Hemingway, Morrison. An eclectic collection that suggested a hungry, curious mind. You're nothing like your reputation, I said. Reputations are useful tools. They're not meant to be accurate. He settled onto a leather sofa, watching me explore. What did you expect to find? I don't know. Guns mounted on walls. Intimidating artwork. Evidence of your crimes conveniently displayed. Sorry to disappoint. I'm not disappointed. I turned to face him. I'm confused. Why? 'Cause I've spent months building an image of you in my head. The villain. The target. The embodiment of everything I'm fighting against. I set down my glass. And now I'm standing in your living room, surrounded by books I love, feeling things I shouldn't feel. What things? Traction. Curiosity. The desire to understand you better. I laughed bitterly. None of which helps me do my job. Maybe your job isn't as simple as you thought. It was simple before I met you. No, it wasn't. He stood, crossing to where I stood by the bookshelf. You've been fighting ghosts your whole career, Valentina. Vincent Caruso wearing 1,000 different faces. But I'm not him. And destroying me won't bring your mother back. Don't. I'm not saying it to hurt you. I'm saying it because someone should. His hand found my cheek, gentle despite its strength. You deserve more than a life built on revenge. You deserve to actually live. I don't know how. Neither do I. He smiled sadly. But maybe we can figure it out together. He kissed me again, and this time I didn't think about consequences or complications or career destruction that I just felt. I woke up in sheets that smelled like sandalwood and sin. For a moment I didn't remember where I was. Then I felt the warmth beside me, the arm draped across my waist, the steady rhythm of breathing against my neck. Luca last night came flooding back. The dinner. Kiss. The way he'd carried me to his bedroom and taken his time learning every inch of my body. The way I'd let him. The way I'd wanted him to. What had I done? I slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him. Found my dress crumpled on the floor, my shoes scattered near the door. Evidence of choices I couldn't take back. The bathroom mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Swollen lips. Tangled hair. A mark on my neck that would require creative concealment. She looked satisfied in a way that made me want to slap her dot or thank her that I couldn't decide which. Running away. Luca's voice made me jump. He stood in the doorway, sleep-rumpled and unfairly beautiful, wearing only a pair of low-slung pants that did nothing to help my resolve. Getting dressed. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He moved toward me, and I hated how my body responded to his proximity. Regrets already? I haven't decided yet. Fair enough. He stopped inches away, close enough to touch but not touching. For what it's worth, I don't regret anything. You have less to lose. Do I? His eyes searched mine. I just slept with the woman who's dedicated her career to destroying me. If that's not complicated, I don't know what is. You seem remarkably calm about it. I've learned that some things are worth the complication. His hand found my hip, pulling me closer despite my half-hearted resistance. You're worth the complication, Valentina. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brilliant and passionate and stubborn as hell. I know you fight for what you believe in even when the odds are impossible. I know you taste like fire and feel like coming home. His forehead touched mine. I know I want more. More of what? More of everything. More dinners. More arguments. More nights like last night. His voice dropped. More of you in whatever form you're willing to give. It would have been easier if he'd been cold. Calculating. If he'd treated last night like a conquest and moved on. That I could have handled. That fit the narrative I'd built. This tenderness was something else entirely. I need time, I said. To think. To figure out what this means. Take all the time you need. He stepped back, giving me space. But, Valentina, don't run. Not from this. Not from me. I don't run. No. You fight. His smile was soft. That's what I love about you. Love. The word hung in the air, neither of us acknowledging its weight. I'll call you, I said, gathering my things. I'll be waiting. The walk of shame back to Brooklyn was exactly as humiliating as expected. My dress screamed last night. My heels screamed bad decisions. Every person on the subway seemed to know exactly what I'd done and with whom. By the time I reached my apartment, guilt had crystallized into something sharper. Self-recrimination. The certainty that I'd just destroyed everything I'd worked for. I needed coffee. A shower. 12 hours of sleep and a complete personality transplant. What I got was my sister sitting on my couch. Sophia. I stopped in the doorway, suddenly very aware of how I looked. What are you doing here? I have a key, remember? You gave it to me for emergencies. Her eyes swept over my wrinkled dress, my tangled hair, the mark I hadn't managed to cover. Looks like you had quite a night. It's not what it looks like. Really? 'Cause it looks like you hooked up with someone. Which honestly, good for you. God knows you needed to get laid. She patted the couch beside her. Come. Sit. Tell me everything. There's nothing to tell. Liar. Sophia's smile faded slightly. Val, I'm not here to judge. I'm here because I'm worried about you. That Martinelli case took everything out of you. If you found someone who helps you feel human again, I'm happy. The mention of Martinelli made my stomach clench. Sophia didn't know. Couldn't know. If she found out I'd slept with the man I'd spent months prosecuting, it was just a one-time thing, I said, sinking onto the couch. A moment of weakness. It won't happen again. Why not? Was he bad in bed? No. He was. I stopped, memories flooding back. His hands. His mouth. The way he'd whispered my name like a prayer. He was perfect. Then what's the problem? He's complicated. Our situation is complicated. I rubbed my face. Trust me, Sophia. This isn't something I can pursue. Because of work. Because of everything. I forced a smile. Can we talk about something else? Why are you really here? Sophia's expression shifted, something uncertain flickering across her features. I need to borrow money. How much? $5,000. The number hit me like cold water. Sophia, I don't have that kind of money lying around. What do you need it for? It's nothing. Just some debts I need to pay off. What kind of debts? Val, please. Her voice cracked. I can't explain right now. I just need you to trust me. I'll pay you back, I swear. I studied my sister's face, seeing for the first time the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she couldn't quite meet my gaze. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Sophia, tell me what's going on. I can't. You can. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. Can't fix this, Val. Not everything can be solved by your prosecutor logic and righteous determination. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I got into something bad, okay? I made mistakes. And now people are asking for money I don't have. What people? Just people. Loan sharks? Gamblers. My blood ran cold. Sophia, please. Tell me who. She was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Marco Vitali. The name hit me like a physical blow. Marco Vitali. Head of the Vitali family. Luca's primary rival and, by all accounts, a man who made Luca look like a saint. How? I managed. How do you even know Marco Vitali? There was a party. A friend took me. I didn't know who he was at first. Sophia's tears fell faster. He was charming. Bought me drinks. We talked. And then he offered me something to make the night more fun. Drugs. Just once. I thought just once. But then he kept showing up, kept offering, and before I knew it, she broke down completely. I owe him, Val. For the drugs. For the protection he says he's providing. Every week the number gets bigger. I don't know what to do. I pulled her into my arms, my mind racing. Marco Vitali had targeted my sister. Had gotten her hooked on drugs and now was using that addiction to trap her in debt. This wasn't coincidence. This was strategy. Why didn't you come to me sooner? 'Cause I was ashamed. Because I knew you'd be disappointed. Because I thought I could handle it. She sobbed against my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Val. I'm so sorry. Shoo. It's okay. We'll figure this out. But even as I said the words, I knew the truth. $5,000 wouldn't solve this. Marco Vitali didn't want money. He wanted leverage. Against me, against Luca, against anyone who might threaten his position, and my sister was a pawn in a game I'd barely begun to understand, and I had only one person who might be able to help. Luca answered on the first ring. Valentina, I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. I could hear the smile in his voice. Missing me already? I need your help. The smile vanished. What's wrong? My sister. She's gotten involved with Marco Vitali. Drugs, debt, I don't know the full extent yet. But he's using her to get to me. Or to you. Or both. Silence. When Luca spoke again, his voice was ice. Where are you? My apartment. Brooklyn. Stay there. I'm sending someone to secure the building. Don't leave. Don't let anyone in except my people. A pause. And Valentina? Don't trust anyone. Marco has eyes everywhere. Luca, what is this? Why would he target my sister? 'Cause he knows about us. Someone talked, or he has surveillance we don't know about. His voice tightened. Marco's been waiting for any weakness to exploit. He just found one. This is my fault. If I hadn't gone to dinner with you, this isn't your fault. This is Marco being Marco. He's been looking for leverage against me for years. You and Sophia are just the latest ammunition. I heard movement on his end. I'm on my way. Don't open the door for anyone until I get there. The line went dead. I turned to find Sophia staring at me with wide eyes. Who was that? Someone who can help. That wasn't. Her face paled. Val, that wasn't Luca Martinelli, was it? The guy you just prosecuted? Sophia, oh my God. She backed away from me. That's who you slept with. That's why you came home looking like, oh my God. I can explain. Explain what? That you're sleeping with the enemy? That you've been lecturing me about my bad decisions while you're making worse ones? Her voice rose. He's a criminal, Val. He's exactly like the men you've spent your whole career fighting. He's not like them. Really? Because from where I'm standing, he looks exactly like them. And now you're calling him to fix a problem caused by another criminal like that's normal. She laughed bitterly. We're quite the pair, aren't we? Both of us drowning in the darkness we promised ourselves we'd never touch. Sophia, please. I know how this looks. But Luca is the only one who can help you right now. And what's the price? There's always a price with men like him. Price is mine to pay. Not yours. I grabbed her shoulders. Whatever happens, you stay out of it. You stay safe. Let me handle this. Like you handled Dad leaving? Like you handled Mom dying? Like you've handled everything alone because you think you're the only one strong enough? Tears streamed down her face. I'm tired of watching you sacrifice yourself, Val. I'm tired of being the burden you carry. You're not a burden. You've never been a burden. I pulled her into a fierce hug. You're my sister. My family. The only person in this world I would die for. I don't want you to die for me. I want you to live with me. She clung to me. Promise me. Whatever happens with Martinelli and Vitali and all of this madness, promise me you'll survive it. I promise. But even as I said the words, I wondered if it was a promise I could keep. 20 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. Luca had arrived, and with him, the beginning of a war I wasn't sure any of us would survive. Luca arrived with an Army .4 black SUVs lined the street outside my building, men in dark suits taking positions at every entrance. He walked through my door like he owned the place, his green eyes scanning the apartment before landing on me. You're safe. It wasn't a question, but I heard the relief beneath the words. For now. His gaze moved to Sophia, who stood frozen by the window, watching the armed men below with undisguised terror. You must be Sophia. His voice softened marginally. I'm Luca. I'm going to help you. You're going to get us killed. Sophia's voice shook. Marco Vitali doesn't lose. Everyone knows that. Marco Vitali has never faced me with proper motivation. Luca moved further into the apartment, Dante following like a silent shadow. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out. Sophia looked at me, uncertainty warring with fear. I nodded. Started 3 months ago, she began quietly. A party in the Hamptons. A friend of a friend invited me. I didn't know whose house it was until I got there. Vitali's beach estate. Yes. She wrapped her arms around herself. Marco was charming. Attentive. He made me feel special, like I was the only person in the room. Looking back, I can see how calculated it was. But at the time, he's good at that, Luca said flatly. It's how he operates. Find vulnerable targets. Make them feel valued. Then trap them. He offered me cocaine. Said everyone was doing it, that it was no big deal. Sophia's voice cracked. I'd never done drugs before. But I wanted to fit in. Wanted to feel like I belonged in that world. And after that first time, he kept showing up. At my classes. The coffee shop where I studied. Always with more drugs. Always making it seem casual, like we were just friends hanging out. Tears spilled down her cheeks. By the time I realized I was addicted, I was already in debt. He said the drugs weren't free. Said I owed him for months of generosity. How much? $50,000. The number made my stomach drop. I thought it was 5,000. Bad enough. But 50, that's not debt, Lucas said quietly. That's ownership. He never intended to let you pay it off. What do you mean? Marco doesn't deal in money. He deals in leverage. Luca's jaw tightened. Your sister is a prosecutor who just finished a high-profile case against me. Your value isn't financial. It's strategic. He targeted me because of Val. He targeted you because of what Val represents. Access. Influence. The ability to destroy enemies through legal channels. Luca turned to me. This was never about drugs or money. This was about acquiring a weapon to use against anyone who threatened him. Including me. Pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Marco hadn't stumbled upon Sophia by accident. He'd researched my family, found my weakness, and exploited it with surgical precision. So what do we do? I asked. First, we get Sophia clean. I have a facility upstate, private, secure. She'll be safe there while she recovers. I can't just disappear. I have classes. A life. Your life is in danger. Luca's voice was gentle but firm. Marco knows you're his leverage. The moment he realizes you've come to me, he'll try to take you. The facility isn't optional. It's survival. Sophia looked at me, desperate and afraid. I took her hands in mine. It's temporary. Few weeks, maybe a month. Just until we neutralize the threat. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Marco has an army. So do I. Luca's smile was cold. And I have something he doesn't. What? Motivation. His eyes found mine, and I saw something fierce burning in their depths. He threatened the woman I love and her family. That's not a debt that goes unpaid. Love. There was that word again. Spoken casually, like it was obvious. Like it was fact. Luca, we'll discuss it later. He turned to Dante. Get Sophia to the facility. Take the back roads. Full security detail. And you. I'm staying here. With Valentina. Dante nodded and moved towards Sophia, who flinched away. It's okay, I told her. Dante will keep you safe. I trust him. You trust all of them now? After one night? Sophia's voice was bitter. How quickly things change. Sophia, please. Fine. I'll go to your secret facility. I'll get clean. I'll be the good little hostage while you play war games with criminals. She grabbed her jacket, refusing to look at me. But when this is over, we're going to have a long conversation about the choices you've made. She left with Dante, and the apartment felt emptier without her. She's angry, Luca observed. She's scared. And hurt. And feeling like the burden she's always believed herself to be. I sank onto the couch. This is my fault. I should have been paying more attention. Should have noticed something was wrong. You were busy trying to put me in prison. I'd say your attention was reasonably occupied. Don't joke. Not about this. I'm not joking. He sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. You're not responsible for Marco's choices. Or Sophia's. You're responsible for fighting to fix things, which is exactly what you're doing. By allying with a crime lord against another crime lord. My ethics professor would be so proud. Your ethics professor never had to navigate a world where legal channels fail and the only justice available comes from people willing to get their hands dirty. He took my hand. This isn't the life you wanted. I know that. But it's the life you have. And I'm going to help you survive it. Why? Why do you care so much? I told you. I love you. You've known me for weeks. I've known you for months. Every court appearance. Every motion filed. Every piece of evidence you assembled to destroy me. His thumb traced circles on my palm. I watched you fight with everything you had, knowing the odds were against you, never backing down. I fell in love with that woman long before I kissed her. That's insane. Probably. But it's also true. He lifted my hand to his lips. I don't expect you to say it back. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that whatever happens next, you're not alone. I looked at him. This man who should be my enemy but had become something else entirely. At the future stretching before us, complicated and dangerous and uncertain. I don't know what I feel, I admitted. Everything's happening so fast. A week ago you were the target. Now you're the ally. The center. The word surprised us both. You've become the center of everything. My thoughts. My plans. My fears. I laughed shakily. It's terrifying. I know the feeling. Cupped my face. We don't have to figure it all out tonight. We just have to survive tonight. The rest can come later. And if there is no later, if Marco, there will be a later. I promise you. His eyes held mine. I've survived things that should have killed me a dozen times over. I didn't do it alone, and neither will you. He kissed me, and for a moment the fear receded. There was only warmth. Only connection. only the impossible hope that somehow we'd find our way through this. When we separated, he rested his forehead against mine. Now, let's talk strategy. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marco Vitali's power came from three sources: his drug operation, his political connections, and his reputation for brutality. Remove any one of them and he'd be weakened. Remove all three and he'd be finished. The drug operation is the easiest target, Luca explained, spreading maps across my coffee table. His main distribution hub is a warehouse in Red Hook. We take that out, we cripple his cash flow. And his political connections? That's where you come in. He looked at me. You have access to files, evidence, things the legal system has collected but never acted on. I need you to compile everything you have on Marco's allies. Anyone who's taken bribes. Anyone who's looked the other way. You want me to leak confidential information. I want you to expose corruption. There's a difference. The Bar Association might disagree. The Bar Association isn't trying to save your sister. His voice softened. I'm not asking you to become a criminal. I'm asking you to use your skills in ways the system won't allow. Sometimes justice requires stepping outside the lines. It went against everything I believed in, every principle I'd built my career on, every oath I'd sworn, but Sophia's terrified face swam in my mind. The tears, the shame, the desperate plea for help. What about his reputation? I asked, setting aside my objections for now. That's the tricky part. Marco's reputation is built on fear. People believe he's untouchable because no one's ever successfully challenged him. Luca's smile was predatory. We're going to change that belief. How? By humiliating him. Publicly. In a way that can't be denied or explained away. He leaned forward. Marco's hosting a gala next week. A charity event for appearances. Every major player in the city will be there. And we're going to crash it. You and me. Together. His eyes glittered. We're going to walk into his house, on his turf, in front of everyone who matters, and show them that Luca Martinelli isn't afraid of Marco Vitali. That's not humiliation. That's suicide. It's a statement. One that will shift the balance of power in ways Marco won't be able to recover from. He took my hands. I know it sounds crazy. But trust me. I've been playing this game my whole life. I know how to win. And if you're wrong, then we go down fighting. His grip tightened. But I'm not wrong, Valentina. I've never been more certain of anything. I looked at the maps, the plans, at the man asking me to trust him with everything. "'Kay," I said finally. "Let's crash a party." His smile was like sunrise. That's my girl. The week before the gala passed in a blur of preparation. Luca's people worked around the clock. Surveillance on Marco's movements. Background checks on his security team. Floor plans of the estate memorized until I could navigate them blindfolded. Every detail planned, every contingency considered. I spent my days compiling evidence. Years of files, buried cases, dismissed charges. Paper trail of Marco Vitali's corruption was staggering. Judges he'd bought. Politicians he'd blackmailed. Witnesses who'd conveniently disappeared before trials. By the time I finished, I had enough to bring down half of New York's power structure. "This is everything?" Luca asked, reviewing the files I'd assembled. "Everything I could access without raising suspicion." I rubbed my tired eyes. "Some of it is circumstantial. But together it paints a picture that's impossible to ignore. We're not going to a courtroom. We're going to war." He set down the files. "This gives us leverage. Make sure Marco knows that if anything happens to us, everything goes public. Mutually assured destruction. The only language men like Marco understand." He pulled me into his arms. "You've been working non-stop for days. When's the last time you slept? I'll sleep when this is over. You'll sleep now. He guided me toward the bedroom. A few hours. I'll wake you if anything changes. Luca, no arguments. His voice was gentle but firm. You're no good to anyone exhausted, and I need you sharp for what's coming. I wanted to protest. There was still so much to do, so many details to review. But my body betrayed me, exhaustion pulling at my limbs with irresistible force. Stay with me, I murmured as he tucked me into bed. Always. He curled around me, his warmth a shield against the fears circling in my mind. Within minutes, I was asleep. The dreams came, as they always did when stress overwhelmed me. On my mother's face. Her smile, bright and warm, the way it had been before Vincent Caruso entered our lives. Then the darkness. The bruises she tried to hide. The fear in her eyes that never quite went away. The night she died, I'd been at a friend's house, studying for exams, blissfully unaware that my world was ending. The police came the next morning. Told me she'd taken her own life. I knew it was a lie. Knew it the way I knew my own name. But proving it was impossible. Vincent Caruso had powerful friends. The investigation was closed before it really began. I'd spent every day since trying to bring justice to men like him. Trying to prove that the system could work if you fought hard enough. Now I was sleeping with a crime lord and planning to destroy another, and my mother would be so disappointed. Or maybe she'd understand. Maybe she'd see that sometimes the only way to fight monsters was to ally with other monsters. Maybe she'd forgive me for becoming something I'd sworn I never would. I woke with tears on my cheeks and Luca's arms still around me. Nightmare, he asked quietly. Memory. Sometimes those are worse. He brushed hair from my face. Want to talk about it? My mother. The night she died. I stared at the ceiling. I've spent so long trying to honor her memory by fighting for justice. Now I'm not sure what justice even means anymore. Justice isn't a fixed point. It's a direction. Luca propped himself on one elbow. You're still moving toward it. The path is just different than you expected. The path involves attending a criminal's gala and deliberately provoking a war. The path involves protecting your sister and removing a threat to countless others. His eyes held mine. Marco Vitali isn't just dangerous to us. He's dangerous to everyone in his orbit. The drugs he sells destroy families. The fear he creates paralyzes communities. Taking him down isn't revenge. It's service. You make it sound noble. Can be both. Messy and noble. Complicated and right. He kissed my forehead. Your mother raised a fighter. Whatever choices you make, that hasn't changed. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that I could walk through fire and emerge on the other side still recognizable as the woman I'd always tried to be. What time is it? Almost noon. The gala is in 6 hours. 6 hours until everything changed. 6 hours until we walked into the lion's den and challenged the lion to fight. Then we should get ready. The dress Luca had chosen was red, blood red. Bold. Impossible to ignore. Kind of dress that announced its wearer as someone who demanded attention and wouldn't apologize for taking up space. I stared at myself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. Professional bun replaced by loose waves cascading over bare shoulders. Minimal makeup amplified into something dramatic and striking. Simple earrings exchanged for diamonds that caught the light with every movement. I looked like a woman who belonged at Luca Martinelli's side. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Stunning. Luca appeared behind me, dressed in a tuxedo that made him look like a fallen angel. Dark fabric. Perfect fit. Tattoos hidden beneath expensive cloth, but still somehow present in the way he carried himself. I feel like I'm wearing armor. You are. He adjusted my necklace, his fingers warm against my skin. That's exactly what it is. Armor for a different kind of battlefield. And if the armor isn't enough, Then we improvise. He met my eyes in the mirror. But it won't come to that. Marco won't risk open warfare in front of witnesses. He'll posture. He'll threaten. But he won't act. You seem very certain. I know Marco. We grew up together, believe it or not. Our fathers were allies before they became enemies. Something dark flickered across his face. He's predictable in his cowardice. He only attacks when he's certain of victory. Tonight, he won't be certain of anything. Because of us. Because of you. He turned me to face him. You're the wild card, Valentina. Prosecutor who became my lover. The enemy who became my ally. Marco won't know how to calculate you. And that uncertainty will make him careful. So I'm a strategic asset. You're much more than that. His hands cupped my face. But yes, strategically, your presence changes everything. Tells the world that Luca Martinelli isn't just powerful. He's capable of inspiring loyalty from his former adversaries. Or it tells them I'm a hypocrite who abandoned her principles. Some will see it that way. Let them. His thumbs traced my cheekbones. The people who matter will see the truth. That you're strong enough to adapt. To evolve. To fight for what matters even when it requires sacrifice. What if I'm not that strong? You are. Kissed me softly. You've always been. You just needed someone to remind you. Car arrived at 7. We descended from the penthouse like royalty, surrounded by Luca's men in their dark suits and watchful eyes. The city blurred past as we drove toward the Vitali estate, toward the confrontation that would determine everything. Nervous? Luca asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He squeezed my fingers. Just remember. Whatever happens in there, we leave together. No matter what Marco says or does, we don't separate. Understood. Understood. And Valentina. His voice dropped. If things go wrong, if it looks like we're not getting out, you run. Don't look back. Don't try to save me. Just run. I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. No. I turned to face him. We go in together. We come out together. That's the only way this works. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or love. Stubborn woman. You wouldn't have me any other way. His smile was brief but genuine. No. I wouldn't. The Vitali estate blazed with light against the darkness. A mansion that rivaled palaces, set on grounds that stretched for acres. Cars lined the circular drive, each one worth more than most people's homes. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits filtered through the massive doors, welcomed by staff in crisp uniforms, the picture of respectable wealth, the reality of blood money made beautiful. Ready? Luca asked as our car reached the entrance. No. Let's do it anyway. The door opened and we stepped into the light, heads turned immediately. Whispers spread like wildfire. I felt every eye on us as we walked up the marble steps, Luca's hand warm at the small of my back. Luca Martinelli. The doorman's voice faltered slightly. You're not on the guest list. I'm never on the guest list. Luca's smile was sharp enough to cut. And yet, here I am. The man glanced nervously toward the house, clearly unsure how to handle a situation not covered in his training. Let them in. Marco Vitali's voice carried across the entrance hall. He stood at the top of a grand staircase, dressed in white like some perverse angel, his smile as manufactured as always. Luca. What an unexpected pleasure. He descended the stairs with calculated grace. And the lovely prosecutor. I heard rumors you two had become close. I assumed they were exaggerations. Assume nothing about me, I said coolly. That's where your predecessor made his mistake. Something flickered in Marco's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or reassessment. She has fire. I see why you like her. He stopped before us, close enough to touch. But fire can be dangerous, Luca. It tends to burn those who get too close. I've always been comfortable with heat. Luca's voice was equally pleasant, equally dangerous. It's the cold that kills. And you've always been cold, Marco. Pragmatic. There's a difference. Marco's attention shifted to me. Miss Sinclair, I believe you have something of mine. Your leverage, you mean? My sister. I smiled without warmth. She's somewhere you'll never find her. Getting clean. Getting strong. And when she's ready, she'll testify about everything you did to her. Testimony from a drug addict. How compelling. Testimony supported by financial records, text messages, and the sworn statements of 6 former employees who've already agreed to cooperate. I held his gaze. You targeted my family, Marco. That was your mistake. My only mistake was underestimating your willingness to become what you hate. He gestured at Luca. You've traded one criminal for another. How does that fit with your precious ethics? My ethics are my concern. Your survival is yours. I stepped closer. We have everything. Every bribe. Every threat. Every body you've buried. It goes public in 48 hours unless you disappear. Disappear. Leave New York. Leave the country. Take whatever you can carry and never come back. Luca's voice cut through like a blade. That's the deal. Your life for your empire. Marco laughed, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. The fear he was trying to hide. You think you can walk into my home and dictate terms? I think I just did. Luca smiled. The question is whether you're smart enough to accept them. Silence stretched between us. The guests nearby had stopped pretending not to listen, their conversations dying as they sensed the shift in power dynamics. 48 hours, Marco finally said. I'll consider your offer. You'll accept it. Because the alternative is war. Luca took my hand. And I've spent the last week preparing for war. Have you? We turned and walked away, leaving Marco standing alone at the base of his grand staircase. The whispers followed us out the door, spreading like wildfire through the assembled elite. Luca Martinelli had just challenged Marco Vitali in his own home, and Marco had blinked. Marco Vitali didn't accept our terms. Instead, he made one final desperate play. The attack came at 3 a.m. 2 days after the gala. Luca's penthouse was supposed to be impenetrable. State-of-the-art security. Armed guards at every entrance. Surveillance covering every angle. None of it mattered when someone on the inside had been bought. I woke to the sound of gunfire. Luca was already moving, pulling me from the bed, pressing a gun into my hands that I barely knew how to use. Stay behind me, he ordered. Don't hesitate. Don't think. If anyone comes through that door who isn't mine, you shoot. Luca, promise me. I promise. The bedroom door burst open and chaos erupted. I'd never fired a gun in my life. Never wanted to. But when a masked man aimed his weapon at Luca's back, instinct took over. My fingers squeezed the trigger before my brain could process what I was doing. The recoil nearly knocked me off my feet. The man crumpled. I'd just shot someone. I'd just possibly killed someone. There was no time to process it. Luca grabbed my hand and pulled me through a door I hadn't known existed, into a passage that led down through the building's bones. Behind us, the sounds of battle continued. Gunfire. Shouting. The wet sounds of violence I'd only ever heard in movies. Dante's holding them off, Luca said, his voice tight. We need to get to the garage. What about your men? They know what to do. My priority is getting you out. I'm not leaving you to Valentina. He stopped, gripping my shoulders. You are my priority. Not the building. Not the men. Not the war. You. So please, for once in your stubborn life, let me protect you. The intensity in his eyes stole my breath. I nodded. We ran. The garage was chaos. Cars burning, men fighting, Marco's soldiers streaming through entrances that should have been sealed. Luca moved through it all like water, deadly and graceful, taking down anyone who got too close. I followed, the gun still clutched in my trembling hands, firing twice more when I had to. Both shots hit their marks. Both times I felt a piece of my soul crack. We made it to an armored SUV, Luca throwing me inside before sliding behind the wheel. The engine roared to life and we crashed through the garage door, leaving the carnage behind. Where are we going? I managed, my voice shaking. The safe house in Jersey. Marco doesn't know about it. Luca's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. We regroup there. Plan our counterattack. Counterattack? Luca, we barely survived. Which means Marco spent everything he had on that assault. He's weak now. Exposed. His jaw tightened. We finish this tonight. How? I know where he'll go when things fall apart. A property his father left him, upstate. Abandoned, off the books. His eyes met mine briefly. He thinks no one knows about it. He's wrong. You want to go after him now? After what just happened? I want to end this before anyone else gets hurt. His voice softened. Before he has a chance to regroup and come at us again. Before he decides Sophia is worth pursuing despite the risks. Sophia. My sister, still recovering at the facility upstate. Still vulnerable despite all our precautions. Okay, I said. Let's end it. The safe house was exactly that. Safe, hidden in the industrial wastelands of Jersey City, surrounded by abandoned factories and forgotten dreams. Kind of place no one looked twice at. The kind of place perfect for disappearing. Dante arrived an hour after us, bloodied but alive. The news wasn't good. We lost 8 men, he reported grimly. The penthouse is compromised. Someone talked, but we don't know who yet. It doesn't matter. Luca was already loading weapons, his movements precise and methodical. By morning, there won't be anyone left to talk to. You're going after Marco. We're going after Marco. Luca looked at me. Unless you want to stay behind. I started this by slapping you in a bar. I'm finishing it. Something like pride flickered across his face. Dante, assemble whoever's left. We move in 2 hours. Boss, you sure about this? We're outnumbered. Outgunned. If Marco has reinforcements, he won't. He burned every bridge tonight with that attack. No one's coming to save him. Luca chambered around. He's alone. And alone, he's nothing. Dante nodded and disappeared to gather the survivors, and in the silence that followed, Luca turned to me. You don't have to come. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. I took his hands in mine. Marco targeted my sister. Tried to use her to destroy me. Tried to destroy us. I lifted his hands to my lips. This became my fight the moment I met you. You regret that? Meeting me? Ask me again when this is over. He smiled, tired and sad and beautiful. I love you, Valentina Sinclair. I love you too, Luca Martinelli. The words came easier now. More natural. More true. So let's go kill the bastard who tried to take that away from us. The Vitali compound was nothing like the mansion where we'd crashed the gala. This was old money gone to rot. A Victorian estate crumbling at the edges, surrounded by overgrown gardens and rusting gates. The kind of place that looked haunted even in daylight, and the pre-dawn darkness, it looked like something from a nightmare. 12 guards, Dante reported, studying the surveillance from our position in the tree line. Plus Marco. He's in the main house, 2nd floor. That's fewer than expected. Luca frowned. He's either more confident than he should be, or he's planning something. Only one way to find out. We moved like shadows through the darkness. Luca's remaining men were professionals, taking out guards with silent efficiency. By the time we reached the main house, the perimeter was clear. Too easy, I whispered. Agreed. Luca's hand found mine briefly. Stay close. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was dark and silent, dust motes dancing in the moonlight filtering through cracked windows. Every step echoed on warped floorboards, announcing our presence to anyone listening. Luca Martinelli. Marco's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, amplified by speakers hidden in the walls. I wondered when you'd come. It's over, Marco. Your men are dead. Your allies have abandoned you. Surrender now and I'll make it quick. Quick. Marco laughed, the sound distorted and unsettling. You know, that's what I always hated about you. Your efficiency. Your control. Even when we were children, you were always so fucking composed. Unlike you, who threw tantrums when things didn't go your way. Tantrums. Is that what you call it? A door opens somewhere above us. I call it passion. Something you've never understood. Until now, perhaps. He appeared at the top of the grand staircase, dressed in white as always, a gun hanging loosely from his hand. He looked different than he had at the gala. Smaller. Diminished. Like a balloon slowly losing air. Prosecutor changed you. I can see it. His eyes found mine. Was it worth it, Miss Sinclair? Trading your principles for a criminal's bed? I traded nothing. I evolved. I stepped forward, feeling Luca tense beside me. You wanted to use my sister to control me. To break me. Instead, you showed me who my real enemies are. And who might that be? Men like you. Men who prey on the vulnerable and call it business. Men who destroy lives and call it strategy. I met his gaze without flinching. Men who are about to learn what justice really looks like. Marco laughed again, but there was desperation in it now. Justice. From a woman standing beside Luca Martinelli. That's rich. Luca protects his people. You exploit yours. That's the difference. I took another step. Now put down the gun, Marco. It's over. Over. His smile twisted into something ugly. It's not over until I say it's over. He raised his weapon and everything happened at once. Luca pushed me aside, drawing his own gun. Marco fired, the shot going wide. Dante appeared from somewhere, tackling Marco from behind. The gun clattered across the floor and then silence. Marco lay pinned beneath Dante, his white suit stained with the dust of his own crumbling empire. He looked up at us with hatred burning in his eyes. Kill me then. Get it over with. No. Luca holstered his weapon. Death is too easy. Too quick. Crouched beside his fallen enemy. You're going to prison, Marco. Real prison. Where all those people you've heard over the years will know exactly who you are and what you've done. You can't prove anything, but we can prove everything. I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. This entire conversation has been recorded, along with every piece of evidence I compiled over the last week. By tomorrow, it'll be on the desk of every prosecutor in the state. Marco's face went pale. You bitch! I prefer dedicated public servant. I smiled without warmth. Enjoy your retirement, Marco. I hear Rikers is lovely this time of year. The arrests began at dawn. Federal agents swarmed the compound, taking Marco and what remained of his organization into custody. The evidence I'd provided was more than enough for charges that would keep him behind bars for multiple lifetimes. I watched from a distance, Luca's arm around my shoulders, as the empire Marco had built crumbled into dust. It's really over, I said quietly. This chapter is. There will be others. Luca pressed a kiss to my temple. But for now, yes. It's over. What happens to us now? I'm a prosecutor who just helped a crime lord take down his rival. My career is probably finished. Your career is whatever you want it to be. You could stay in prosecution. You could go into private practice. You could come work for me. helping to legitimize what's left of my operations. He turned me to face him. Or you could do nothing. Take time. Figure out who you want to be next. Who I want to be next. I laughed shakily. I've been so focused on fighting that I never stopped to think about what comes after. After comes now. Cupped my face. And I want to be part of it. Whatever form it takes. Even if I stay a prosecutor. Even if I keep fighting people like you. Especially then. His smile was soft. You make me want to be better, Valentina. You make me believe that maybe someday I could be worthy of you. You're already worthy. Kissed him, soft and sweet, tasting of hope and new beginnings. You just needed someone to remind you. 6 months later, I resigned from the district attorney's office, not because my career was over. It wasn't. The Marco Vitali case had made me a legend, the prosecutor who'd brought down one of the city's most dangerous criminals. I could have written my own ticket to any position I wanted. Instead, I chose something different. The Sinclair Marnelli Foundation launched on a warm spring morning, dedicated to helping victims of organized crime rebuild their lives. Legal aid, rehabilitation services, protection for witnesses who risked everything to testify. All the things the system should have provided but rarely did. Sophia stood beside me at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, 6 months clean and brighter than I'd seen her in years. Her addiction would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She was back in school, studying social work, determined to help others the way she'd been helped. You look happy, she observed. I am happy. Even though you gave up everything you worked for? I didn't give up anything. I just found a different path to the same destination. I squeezed her hand. Justice doesn't only happen in courtrooms. Sometimes it happens in places like this. Luca appeared at my side, slipping his arm around my waist. He'd been true to his word about legitimizing his operations. It was slow going, decades of criminal infrastructure couldn't be dismantled overnight, but progress was being made. Every month, another illegal operation closed. Every quarter, another legitimate business launched. He was becoming the man he'd always wanted to be. And I was helping him get there. Ready, he asked. For what? The rest of our lives. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I've been waiting for the right moment. This seems like it. My heart stopped as he opened the box to reveal a ring. Simple. Elegant. A diamond surrounded by rubies that seemed to glow with inner fire. Valentina Sinclair. He lowered himself to one knee, right there in front of the cameras and the crowd and everyone who mattered. You slapped me in a bar and changed my entire life. You challenged everything I believed about myself and showed me who I could become. You loved me when loving me was dangerous and complicated and probably insane. Probably. I managed through tears. Definitely insane. He smiled. But the best kind of insane. The kind that creates something beautiful from something broken. He took my hand. Marry me. Not because it's strategic or convenient or makes sense. Marry me because you love me. Because I love you. Because together we're better than we ever were apart. Crowd had gone silent. Sophia was crying. Somewhere, a camera flash went off. I pulled Luca to his feet and kissed him with everything I had. Yes, I whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. The applause that erupted was deafening. But I barely heard it. There was only Luca sliding the ring onto my finger. Only his smile, bright and real and just for me. Only the future stretching before us, complicated and uncertain and absolutely perfect. He had started with a slap and a laugh and 5 words that changed everything. To do that again in your mind. I was his now. And he was mine, and that was exactly where we both belong. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. If you enjoyed, she slapped him in front of his men. Please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories. Your comments mean the world to me. Let me know what you thought and what kind of stories you'd like to see next. Until next time, keep reading and stay mysterious.